Good morning. My name is Quinn Galswick. I'm the university's chief auditor, and today I'm going to be providing you an overview of the internal audit process. This will be especially useful for those of you who are new to the committee, but hopefully is a valuable refresh for those of you who have been with us for a while. So to begin with, let's talk about auditing at the university more broadly. The university's external auditor is Clifton Larson Allen. They do our financial statement audit, which is probably what you think of when you think about audit. In addition to that, though, they also do our audit of federal programs, which is referred to as uniform guidance. This provides the requirements that the government has related to any federal awards that we receive. They, in addition to that, conduct audits of the Minnesota Office of Higher Education financial aid programs as required by the state, and NCAA agreed-upon procedures for our athletics. In addition to the Clifton Larson Allen, we also have the Office of Legislative Auditor. They have the authority to conduct audit work anywhere where the state of Minnesota spends money. And obviously, the University of Minnesota receives money from the state, so they do have authority to be able to come into here and take a look at things as they desire. Federal auditors also are coming to campus relatively frequently, where they may be coming in via various agencies such as NSF, NIH, others who may want to look at a specific process or program. Then finally, the Office of Internal Audit. The Office of Internal Audit is the university's only internal audit function. I report directly to the Board of Regents. Functionally, I report to the Audit and Compliance Committee, all of you. And that functional reporting line really includes oversight of our audit work, oversight of our audit plan, reports, and ensuring that any issues that we identify are being remediated in a timely manner. The administrative reporting line goes to board leadership, and this is oversight of my expenses, our audit department's budget, operations, et cetera. In addition to the chief auditor, there are 16 auditors in the Office of Internal Audit, three audit directors, an associate audit director make up the leadership team. There's 9 financial/operational auditors, 2 IT auditors, and a senior data analyst. We currently have 1 auditor that's located on the Duluth campus. The rest of the internal audit department is located on the Twin Cities campus, but again, we do have oversight over all campuses. So what do we do? Our bread and butter is audit assurance. This makes up 90% of all the audit work in which we conduct. This includes planned audits, which are codified in our audit plan, which is reviewed with the committee in June and approved by the overall board. And then we have special audit requests. These could come from the committee or from other senior leaders that we would go and look at an area of particular risk or interest that may come up throughout the year. So we also conduct investigations into allegations of misconduct. These could come into us via U-Report, which is the university's anonymous hotline that individuals can report concerns that they have that are reviewed by myself and a number of other senior leaders, which are referred to as the university's consultative team. We also sometimes receive allegations into the Office of Internal Audit Department directly. In addition to investigations, we conduct advisory services. These could be formal reviews of risks or operations that we issue to management, but more often they're informal discussions with leaders and/or committees. So we'll be working with a committee to talk through various risks, making sure that there's control processes in place, et cetera. So how do we approach auditing? All of our work is done in alignment with the Institute of Internal Auditors standards. This is an international body that sets the expectations for internal audit departments across all industries and is widely followed and accepted. They updated their standards in 2025, and we had to do some work to our processes, including updating charter, et cetera, and to ensure that we stayed in alignment with those standards. The Internal Audit Department has a broad mandate provided to us by the Board of Regents to review risk in any form. This includes compliance with regulations and university policies, which frankly is what most people think of when they think of the Internal Audit Department. But we also have the ability to opine on emerging risks and potential impacts of strategic initiatives, or even process improvements or areas where efficiency might be obtained. When you think about internal audit, I want you to think about us as the third line of defense. There's a diagram here included in this slide that helps illustrate what I mean by this. The first line of defense we think of as the individuals in the units and departments who are actually doing the work and ensuring that there's controls in place and that they're following formal procedures to make sure that things are well controlled and risks are managed. The second line of defense are our policy owners and our enterprise risk management function and others who are really looking to set those overall standards and provide monitoring and oversight to ensure that we are complying with those standards out in the first line. Then the third line is internal audit, where we provide assurance to the board and to senior leadership that both the first and second lines of defense are operating effectively to address institutional risk. So how do we choose what we audit? I'm not going to go into this in great detail because this is described in our June audit presentation. So I encourage those of you who are new to the Audit and Compliance Committee to go back to that June presentation. But at a very high level, we develop our annual audit plan through very broad consultation. This includes meetings with over 100 different senior leaders at the institution. I make myself available to meet with every regent as part of that planning process as well, to get your perspectives on risk or areas in which you would like us to consider to audit. We then pull that internal information, we combine it with external information on risk from other Big Ten universities, other large research institutions, what federal auditors are currently looking at, et cetera. And from that, we make a risk assessment. We make sure that when we're thinking about what audits we want to do, that it aligns with the institutional risk profile and the university's strategic plan. And then we identify those unit and process audits that we want to conduct. We break our audit plan into two tiers. Tier 1 are the audits in which we intend to complete, which are going to be our highest priority. And Tier 2 are audits that we intend to complete, but if we were to have a request to do a different audit, or if we had a staffing shortage or something of that nature, those would be the audits in which we would be most likely to swap out. We provide this audit plan to the committee in June for review, and that ultimately was approved by the board. So a few types of unique audits. These are not part of the audit plan, but that you will see in your internal audit updates and other docket materials throughout the year. There's first senior leadership transition review audits. These may be limited or full reviews based upon a risk assessment of that senior leader's transition when they leave the university or leave their role from that senior leadership role. The full reviews are full audit reports that you will receive. Limited reviews tend to be a memo to management just explaining the work that we did and generally noting that there was no major issues that were identified. SNAP reviews are very targeted reviews that we do that are designed to provide timely information to process owners. We often are identifying these reviews to do after we've seen an issue in a couple of different audits, and we think it might be useful to take a broader look across the process and give a policy or process owner some information on how we're managing that risk throughout the institution. These normally leverage data analytics when we're doing this work. And then finally, collaborative assessments. These are very large engagements. We've only done this a couple of times, but the idea is that if we have a very complex and broad process that involves multiple units, it's better to take a step back and have a discussion of an overall risk assessment with management and then figure out what is the plan to try to address any high or medium risk that we identify in that process. So how do we conduct audits? When internal audit goes into conduct an audit, we are approaching it by thinking about it in terms of risk. And we start with inherent risk. When we think about risk, we think about it in terms of likelihood times impact. So if you're to picture an XY graph, the highest likelihood, highest impact, and you put likelihood and impact on the X and the Y, the highest likelihood and highest impact would be in the upper right quadrant, and the lowest likelihood, lowest impact would be low risk in the lower left quadrant. When we think about controls then, we're really thinking about moving that risk from the high area down to a medium or low, either by reducing the impact or reducing the likelihood that that risk occurs. When we conduct an audit, we do it in 3 phases. We begin with a planning phase in which we do surveys of the unit or process to determine where the inherent risk lies. And we do scoping to figure out where do we want to spend our resources to get more information on how we're controlling those risks. We then conduct field work where we do detailed process reviews, and we conduct testing to ensure that those controls that we identify in those detailed reviews are operating effectively. We then move to reporting. Again, anywhere where there's a residual risk where we believe that it's high or medium, we will have an issue included in our audit report, noting if it is high or medium. In addition to the issues in the audit report, each issue has a recommendation associated with it, which is internal audit's opinion on a way in which we could try to remediate this risk. We also include a conclusion that will provide some additional information on our overall assessment, and will include an overall rating. We rate all of our audit reports either good, our highest rating, adequate, which is our middle rating, or needs improvement, which would be the lowest rating. Audit reports also include background information on the unit or process reviewed and an executive summary to hopefully make it a little bit easier to digest. Audit reports also include a management action plan. The management action plan is provided by leadership, and it is a response to each of the issues that are identified in the audit report, so each of those high or medium risk. It includes how management intends to address that risk and a timeline for remediation. You will never see the audit report without that management action plan included. After an audit is issued, we will do follow-up on all of the high-risk items identified in our audit reports, and we report to the Audit and Compliance Committee 3 times a year on those remediation efforts. We will continue to follow up on an audit until all issues have been remediated or the risk has been accepted. I will say, once an audit has been outstanding for 2 years with high-risk issues, we'll provide you some additional information on why that risk is still outstanding and expected timelines for remediation. The last component of the report I want to highlight is our control chart. This control chart will be included in all of our audit reports, and the top 4 bars on this bar chart are consistent across all of our audits. So if you want to compare an audit to another audit, taking a look at those top 4 bars is a good place to start. Those top 4 bars come out of COSO, which is the university's control framework, which is approved by board policy. The other bars on this chart are individual control activities, which will vary from audit to audit based upon the particular controls that we looked at for that unit or process. The red on this bar chart ties to the high residual risk areas that we've found. Medium ties to the yellow, and the green ties to places where we have adequate controls. The internal audit charter. I mentioned before that we have been provided a pretty broad mandate from the university's board to review risk in many forms. That comes from our internal audit charter. The charter defines our purpose, authority, responsibilities, reporting, and our independence. It is designed to align with Board of Regents policy, reservation and delegations of authority, and again, it was updated in 2025 to cover the new IIA standards. It's reviewed annually with the Audit and Compliance Committee, but if it requires changes, those changes then need to be approved by the full board. So again, this was done in June. Quality assessment reviews. Quality assessment reviews answer the question, who audits the auditors? So every 5 years by Institute of Internal Auditors standards, the Internal Audit Department is required to get an external assessment of our processes, which is performed by outside audit professionals. This covers all aspects of the audit function, including our internal management, our operations, audit processes, reporting, etc. We conduct these QARs by first doing a self-assessment of our performance against Institute of Internal Auditors standards, as well as best practices, surveys, etc. And then the QAR team will come in and do their own review, meeting with senior leaders, board members, taking a look at our work papers, etc. Our last QAR was conducted in the fall of 2024, and those results were reported to the Audit and Compliance Committee in December of 2024. It was conducted by chief auditors from Virginia Tech, University of Washington, Rutgers, and Boston University. They found that OIA is a high-performing audit function that generally conforms to IIA standards. And this is something I need to highlight every year for everyone on the committee, but generally conforms is the highest possible rating that you can receive in one of these reviews. As I mentioned to many of you before, internal auditors are not known for hyperbole. Despite this rating, we did receive some suggested opportunities for improvement. These recommendations and actions that we have taken were reviewed with the committee in May of 2025. So I would encourage all of you, those of you who are new to the committee, to go back to both the December 2024 board materials and the May 2025 materials to get yourself familiar with what that review found and the actions we have taken since. That being said, I'd like to highlight a few recent and potential process changes that we're making following this QAR, and frankly, the changes to IA standards that happened in 2025. First, we updated our audit report format and risk ranking system in order just to streamline it and make it a little bit more usable. In addition, we wanted to clarify that management ultimately owns the risk management and controls for the institution. When we identify high and medium level issues, i.e. residual risk, we will provide recommendations, but management is not required to implement those recommendations as detailed. Management can address risk any way in which it sees fit. We also simplified the rating titles to high, medium, and low from the more esoteric, essential, significant, and useful, which we used before. So if you go back to some of our old audit materials and you see those words being used, know that they translate to high, medium, and low in our current format. In addition to these report updates, we updated document materials. So there's some new follow-up metrics and trend visualizations that you'll see as part of the internal audit update materials. We removed some schedules, frankly, that were of low value and took a lot of time to use. So we discussed that with the Audit Compliance Committee in May and got agreement to remove those going forward after our June board meeting. And we updated some annual resource usage metrics, which we use to report annually to the committee in June. Going forward, we plan to establish a strategic plan for the Internal Audit Department. We want to do this after the completion of the university's strategic plan to make sure that anything that we are putting together aligns with that. And we're also in the process of reviewing some potential technology replacements or enhancements. This was an area identified in the QAR as we are using a number of very outdated systems, in some cases Access Database, which we developed ourselves over 20 years ago, and an automated work paper system that is relatively inexpensive, but that is its primary value. There's a number of other softwares that are out there now that have a lot of other functionality. Some other important things to know about internal audit. We were established in 1929, so we've been around for a very long time. We're one of the oldest internal audit departments in higher education. We are a founding member of the Association of College and University Auditors, et cetera. I think it's especially important for you to know, though, that our audit reports are generally public documents. There are some narrow situations where our audit reports may not be public, such as if they include information on information security risks, et cetera. But generally, you can expect that our audit reports can be and will be requested by the public. Units and process owners can accept risk. As I mentioned before, management owns the controls and risk management for the institution. However, if we have an audit report where we've identified a high level of residual risk and management is electing to accept that risk, we will provide information about that to the Audit and Compliance Committee so that you are informed that management is choosing to accept that risk. Sometimes that is appropriate. The cost can be very high to try to address the risk, or it just may not work due to other situations that the institution is currently facing. For additional information, we encourage you to go out to the audit's website at audit.umn.edu. We have a number of items there, including our charter, contact information, audit approach, et cetera. The picture you see here on this slide is actually the West Bank office building. I just want to highlight that, as many people don't even know that's part of the University of Minnesota, but it has been our humble home for a couple of decades and is indeed a part of the university. We encourage you to come out and visit it sometime. With that, I look forward to discussing with you on October 9th any questions you may have. Thank you.